What if the story you thought you knew was never the full story? What if the moments that looked like loyalty were actually survival? And what if one quiet interview just unraveled years of family secrets, power struggles, and emotional damage? Today, we are breaking down an interview that changed everything, not with shouting, not with accusations, but with patterns that once you see them, you cannot unsee them. So stay with me, because by the end of this video, the entire sister-wives dynamic may look very different to you. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we need to talk about something that has been sitting heavy with me ever since I watched an interview that many of you kept sending my way over and over again. And when that happens, I know there's a reason, because I do not usually spend time watching interviews from other creators, yet this one would not leave my inbox. So I finally sat down and watched the full conversation that McKelty Padron did on the PopPsych channel, where she spoke openly alongside Tony about her upbringing, her family dynamics, and the emotional weight she has been carrying for years. And what struck me immediately was not just what she said, but how calmly she said it. Because when someone speaks without rage, without bitterness, and without exaggeration, that is often when the truth lands the hardest. The host, David, approaches these conversations from a psychological perspective, and instead of pushing drama, he looks at patterns, family roles, power structures, and emotional survival strategies. And that framing allowed McKelty to open up in a way that felt careful but deeply revealing. And while they covered many topics, including why she moved, her relationship with Robin, and her evolving understanding of her father, the portion that stopped me in my tracks was when the conversation turned to Mary Brown, because suddenly, years of confusion snapped into focus. And as I was watching that section, something unexpected happened. I received a message from a longtime follower of this channel, someone many of you recognize from the comments. Her name is Ellen, and she grew up in the same environment and knew Mary's younger sisters personally. And without hesitation, she said every single thing McKelty described matched what she witnessed growing up. The volatility, the intensity, the fear, the emotional unpredictability. And that moment mattered because it took this from being one perspective to being a recognizable pattern. Ellen shared that Mary's family had a reputation in the community, that people were afraid of the father, that he was known for being verbally aggressive, and that the girls lived in a home filled with tension, fear, and emotional pressure. And while she always felt compassion for them, she also acknowledged that being around them was difficult because those patterns spilled outward and often turned into bullying, loud confrontations, and emotional dominance. And this matters because children raised in high-stress environments often repeat what they know, not because they are cruel, but because survival shapes behavior. And when McKelty began explaining why so many of the kids struggled with Mary over the years, it sounded hauntingly familiar. She described cycles of affection followed by sudden emotional reversals, apologies followed by blame, warmth followed by fear, and moments where a child would leave feeling confused, ashamed, and responsible for repairing something they did not break. And as she spoke, I couldn't help but think of that scene we all remember where Cody sat at a table with another plural family and casually mentioned that some wives felt sharing a kitchen was emotionally damaging. And the second those words landed, Mary broke down because she knew exactly who he was referencing. And she turned to Janelle, apologizing, explaining that she never intended harm, that she was simply raised in a household where people spoke openly and directly. And yet, what McKelty described went far beyond blunt communication. It described emotional punishment, humiliation, fear, and control. And one story in particular revealed everything. She described being around 7 years old, sitting at a dinner table in Wyoming with siblings close in age, kids being kids, laughing, teasing, sticking their tongues out, and Mary repeatedly telling them to stop, until finally singling McKelty out, sending her away from the table while the others continued eating. And McKelty describes sitting alone, hungry, listening to the laughter and yelling continue. And then she said something quietly, that this is one of the only memories she has from that time. And that is how you know a moment mattered, because the brain does not store trivial experiences, it stores emotional ones. And for a child, food is not just nourishment, it is safety, it is care, it is belonging. And when that is taken away as punishment, it leaves a mark. And while it is important to be clear and fair and not equate different situations, that story still points to a broader pattern of discipline, rooted in control, shame, and fear, rather than guidance and safety. And when these moments happen repeatedly, they shape how a child understands love, authority, and worth. And that is why it is completely valid for those kids, now adults, to define their experiences in their own words and to set boundaries accordingly. And McKelty acknowledged that many of the kids do not have relationships with Mary today, and that reality alone speaks volumes, because patterns leave traces, and distance is often a form of self-protection. And as the interview continued, the focus shifted toward Robin Brown, and the tone changed again, because this was not about overt conflict, it was about quiet erosion. McKelty explained that she and Robin are no longer speaking, not because of a dramatic fallout, but because trust has broken down. And what stood out was the role McKelty found herself in for years, acting as a bridge between Robin and Cody that was never hers to carry. And when a child grows up being placed in that mediator role, it creates a sense of responsibility that feels like love, but functions like control. And McKelty admitted that she stepped back because she no longer knew whether private conversations were safe, whether information was being repeated, whether she was being subtly guided into loyalty. And she spoke about learning how vulnerable people can be drawn in unintentionally when they need connection, support, or validation. And as she said that, it reframed years of public reception, including moments when viewers felt frustrated watching her defend narratives that hurt her siblings. Because when someone is inside a dynamic, it feels like survival, not choice. And when the family Christmas situation exploded with text, accusations, and emotional fallout, McKelty once again became the messenger, delivering news that Cody and Robin were opting out of family celebrations. And that moment mattered because being the bearer of painful decisions often transfers the anger onto the messenger, fracturing sibling relationships and isolating the very person doing the emotional labor. And McKelty later acknowledged that being placed in that role caused real damage between her and her siblings. And looking back, she now questions whether she was being used. And that realization does not come easily because it requires grieving not just relationships, but the version of reality you believed kept you safe. And as Tony pointed out, when everyone else has the same negative experience with someone and you are the only one who does not, that deserves reflection, and distance is often the first step toward clarity. And when someone steps away, the narrative begins to unravel, and suddenly patterns that once felt normal start to feel heavy. And that is where McKelty seems to be now, standing at the edge of understanding, aware of the cost, aware of the manipulation, and finally choosing space over chaos. And that shift is not loud, it is quiet, it is careful, and it is deeply personal. And that is why this interview matters, because it was not about drama, it was about recognition. And once you see a pattern, you cannot unsee it. And that is where part 1 truly begins. As the interview continued, something else became clear, and it was subtle but powerful, because McKelty was no longer speaking as someone defending a narrative. She was speaking as someone untangling one. And that shift matters, because when a person starts questioning their role inside a family system, the entire structure begins to wobble. And she talked about how learning about emotional patterns gave her language for things she always felt but could never explain, like why she felt responsible for everyone else's feelings, why conflict followed her even when she tried to keep peace, and why setting boundaries felt like betrayal rather than self-respect. And that is when everything starts to connect, because children who are praised for being helpful, understanding, and loyal often grow into adults who are used as emotional buffers without realizing it. And McKelty admitted that for a long time she believed she was helping, that she was protecting relationships, that she was doing the right thing. And that belief kept her in the middle long after it began hurting her. And when the interviewer suggested that someone could still care while causing harm, it exposed a difficult truth, because intention does not erase impact, and being there for someone does not justify placing a child in adult emotional battles. And McKelty seemed to finally recognize that the cost of that role was isolation, because when siblings see you as the messenger of pain, they associate you with the hurt, even if you did not cause it. And that realization reframes why tension grew between her and her brothers, especially during moments when But as protection, and as she described stepping back, you could hear the grief underneath. Because stepping back also means losing the illusion of closeness and facing the loneliness that comes with clarity. And this is where the timeline of events begins to make more sense, especially the shift viewers noticed after the loss of Garrison Brown, because grief has a way of stripping away denial and forcing honesty. And when someone you love is gone suddenly, the cost of silence feels unbearable, and patterns that once felt tolerable become impossible to ignore. And McKelty did not say this directly, but it hung in the air. That loss changes perspective and forces reflection on how much pain has been normalized and how much responsibility was misplaced. And as she spoke about how her father grew angrier over time, influenced by outside voices, while Robin grew quieter, guarded, and withdrawn, it revealed two very different responses to public accountability. And this is important because silence is not always humility. Sometimes it is strategy. And when someone who once spoke freely suddenly retreats only when criticized, it suggests adaptation rather than growth. And McKelty noticed that shift and questioned it, because inconsistency invites scrutiny, and the idea that someone becomes shy only in moments of accountability does not align with earlier behavior. And that realization matters, because it shows McKelty is no longer absorbing narratives without examining them, and that alone signals change. And when you look back at earlier seasons and compare them to recent appearances, the contrast is stark, because affection that was once unapologetic became restrained only when it was criticized. And that does not indicate discomfort with affection, it indicates awareness of audience reaction. And when accountability enters the picture, behavior often shifts, not to correct harm, but to avoid consequence. And recognizing that requires distance, observation, and honesty. And McKelty appears to finally be standing outside the dynamic rather than inside it. And that position allows clarity, but it also brings pain, because it means acknowledging that relationships you thought were safe may have been conditional, and that loyalty may have been rewarded only when it served someone else. And this is why so many viewers felt conflicted watching her early Patreon content, because from the outside, it looked like she was defending harm, but from the inside, it likely felt like survival. And when people exit high-control family systems, there is often a phase where they echo the dominant narrative, because challenging it feels too dangerous. And that phase is not failure, it is part of the process. And now we are witnessing the next phase: questioning, distancing, and reassessing. And that does not happen overnight. It happens slowly with discomfort and doubt and grief, and McKelty acknowledged that stepping away has been painful emotionally and relationally because it forced her to confront how much damage that mediator role caused, not just to herself but to her sibling relationships. And when she said she wants connection only if trust exists, it showed growth. Because boundaries are not walls, they are filters. And wanting trust is not rejection, it is self-respect. And when you step back and look at the family as a whole, the pattern becomes clearer. Triangulation creates chaos, mediators absorb blame, and those at the center remain insulated. And that structure thrives on confusion because clarity threatens control. And once one person steps out, the system reacts, and that reaction often confirms what the person feared in the first place. And this is why distance feels necessary, because it creates space to think without constant emotional noise. And as McKelty continues learning about unhealthy dynamics, she is beginning to name what once felt unnameable. And that is powerful, because language gives agency, and agency breaks cycles. And while some viewers may still feel frustration or confusion, it is important to remember that growth is not linear, and healing inside public families is even harder because every step is scrutinized and judged. And yet McKelty chose to speak anyway, not with accusations, but with reflection. And that choice matters because it invites conversation rather than conflict, and it allows others who grew up in similar systems to see themselves without shame. And that is why this interview resonated so deeply, because it was not about assigning blame, it was about understanding cost. And once cost is understood, boundaries follow, and relationships change, and silence becomes intentional rather than fearful. And that is where part 2 leaves us, not with answers, but with awareness. And once awareness exists, the story can never go back to what it was before.